and how schools as of July 1st will be able to pay student athletes directly for the first time in college athletics history. Pay for play is going away with the wild wild west and how we've seen it over the last several years. And this is the first time we're getting structure. This is the first time that we're getting some semblance of kind of reining things in, and getting some type of structure with paying student athletes. And obviously the back pay dating back to 2016, that's obviously a different thing. But we're going to focus on kind of the now and what it means for moving forward. So that news dump, Sean, late Friday night, 9:18, I think is when it was officially passed. And of course, we're at Malachi's game for the Kentucky Indiana All-Star game, and we're like, go figure, because I'm with Zach. Zach has the night shift, so he's like, wow, I'm gonna have to drop what I'm doing right now and write about the biggest story in the history of college sports while I'm at an All-Star game, about to interview Malachi, all that stuff. So it really was just like, you couldn't have timed it any worse. But it actually ended up working in Kentucky's favor, because it is a pretty important subject. But before I'll kind of get into what it means and why in my opinion, it is a total game changer for Kentucky basketball specifically, as we move forward, just kind of your initial reaction to just the news that dropped, and how we are now approaching a brand new era of college sports as we know it.
Well, I think it's one of those things that we feel like we've been moving towards for a while, right? But we just didn't know where. Like, we knew kind of where we were headed, just didn't know how long it was going to take to get to that point. But this is obviously a significant step to a program like the University of Kentucky, that Mitch Barnhart talking about being continuing to be competitive, and like, this puts you in a position to where, as Kentucky, you can be even more competitive and continue to stay at the pinnacle of where you want to be in its sport. So one of those things that it always seems like something like that's just crazy news, that's just monumental, right? Always breaks at some of the strangest times, and it breaks late on a Friday night, and it's a big deal for college athletics, massive deal for Kentucky basketball, and then obviously on the football side, we know the revenue and things that come with that sport. But when you're talking one of the premier programs in college basketball, this is a pretty big deal for Kentucky to put itself in position to be able to do things, and with NIL that can keep them at the forefront of where they want to be as a program.
And we did get a statement from Mitch Barnhart where he said, schools will have the opportunity to not participate. That's not going to be Kentucky. We will be participating to the fullest extent, with the $20.5 million distributed year one, and then by 2035 it'll go up to $34-ish million. So Kentucky will be all in, and be a full participant. And Mitch did kind of have the verbiage of we're in this to win this. Like, we're going to maximize this, try to find advantages where we can, and not just take a blanket, here are the percentages, let's have a nice day. That kind of had a word, this is a chance for schools to be competitive and find little kind of nooks and crannies of advantages, and using it to, Kentucky's advantage against the SEC, and obviously in the, national college landscape. So some kind of big picture takeaway things with the settlement, kind of just what it means for all of sports, the roster limits. It will be 105 for football, 15 for men's and women's basketball, 34 for baseball, 28 for men's and women's soccer, 25 for softball, and 18 for volleyball. And I think the number that we are seeing kind of nationally is kind of just the general most teams are kind of basing off of, that doesn't necessarily apply to Kentucky, doesn't necessarily apply specifically to the SEC as of right now, but generally football, think 75% of that $20.5 million is going to be going to football, 15% going to men's basketball, 5% going to women's basketball, and then all the other sports essentially going to 5% or whatever the leftover will be in that case. So there's the conversation about Kentucky basketball, Sean, and I want to get your thoughts on this, because Kentucky basketball being such a unique in such a unique spot where I know it's kind of a taboo topic, but Kentucky basketball, being a basketball school in its richest tradition and history, we like to tout ourselves as an everything school, and we're proud of all of our other schools. But Kentucky basketball versus most of the other juggernauts in other sports, it just doesn't necessarily compare. That is our calling card, while also balancing the fact that football is the revenue. Football is the money driver. Whether there's 50% of butts in seats or 100% of butts in seats at Kroger Field, it's still going to be more than a sellout at Rupp Arena any given night. So there is kind of a push and pull that comes with that, and it is kind of just something that we have to navigate. There's a report. Ross Dellinger went on Matt Jones' podcast and talked about how Kentucky basketball pushed back on the SEC's idea of that general kind of football is going to be our baby. It's going to get the 75%. Basketball is going to get 15 and what have you. It's my understanding that it's not necessarily a Kentucky basketball eats first conversation when we talk about who gets what and how the pie gets sliced. It is more of a Mitch Barnhart in the Kentucky athletic department wants year to year flexibility. They do not want to be hamstrung for any year, any specific sport by any. They don't want to be told where their money is going to be going. They want, if there is going to be a year that the women's basketball program needs to invest in two local recruits that are gonna two local 5 stars that are gonna cost a little bit more than what the traditional NIL budget is going to look like. We need to invest a little bit more there and maybe take away a little bit less here. That's kind of the day-by-day flexibility that Mitch Barnhart wants. So the conversation in a vacuum has been men's basketball wanting more of a cut is not necessarily the truth. It's more of the general flexibility that Kentucky wants, not with one sport is struggling and another is thriving, to be able to kind of pick and choose where to invest in. Where Kentucky basketball comes into the picture and why, in my opinion, this House settlement is an absolute total game changer for Kentucky basketball is this House settlement now forces the Wild Wild West as we have known it, the pay for play where it is a bidding war where guys that are totally undeserving of 7-figure deals, just we got to get somebody and we have X number of dollars, we just got to pour it in. That mindset and the panic of the traditional NIL going away, that now comes back into the picture where natural branding and things of that level are so much more important today than they were in the last 2 portal cycles. Basically, Mark Pope, when he arrived, it was we got to pay for the most expensive roster in college basketball. How can we do that? How can we get the Crafts to fund our rosters over the next, couple of cycles until there are guardrails put up? So yes, Kentucky did a tremendous job getting by with these last 2 classes. And yes, Kentucky does have one of the most expensive rosters in college basketball, probably the most expensive roster, but it is totally unsustainable long-term to expect that these donors are going to come out every single year and write a blank check for you. It's just, when you look at the return of investment, Sean, what is, these guys are billionaires, not because they're dumb with their money. And yes, they enjoy being fans of these programs. And Joe Kraft, is a diehard Kentucky basketball fan. He did not get rich by being a Kentucky basketball fan. Like that's just not the reality. So there is, and that's not exclusive to Kentucky, but there is a general sense in the college landscape, talking to, people all across the country, that well was going to dry up at some point. And when you set the market for X player is worth $3.5 million, when this guy makes that much in this cycle, and then the next cycle, the same pot of money is gone, And they're like, we're not going to just give you as much money as you need to pay that the next guy that's worth apparently $3.5 million. We don't have that to give. And then that guy goes, well, where's my cut? That kind of thinking was just totally unsustainable, and part of why Kentucky internally was rooting for this result. They wanted Kentucky basketball to get back to being a traditional NIL where at its core, Kentucky does better than anywhere else. So it's my understanding, Sean, that how the next 5-star top 5 recruit in the country, what have you, how he is going to be an expensive, top end guy. It's not going to come necessarily from the, whatever the allotment is, the 15%, which would amount to $3 million. Just call it $3 million with the rev share. Obviously, you're not going to be able to fund your entire college basketball roster with the $3 million that's going to come with a rev share. But where Kentucky separates itself is the national brands. That it's my understanding that when we have these, the NIL Go now, where there's going to be total transparency and every single deal over $600 is going to have to go into, kind of the like, hey, we're going to sign off on this to make sure it's a legitimate NIL deal. The way Kentucky is going to separate itself is the national relationships with, Kobe Brea with TurboTax is a great example. Those are the legitimate deals that the NCAA with this NIL Go is going to be totally comfortable passing. And Kentucky's relationships with those Dick's Sporting Goods and the Nikes and the national brands is infinitely better than 95% of the other competitive schools out there. And they will set the fair market value for these student athletes. So what the guardrails are put up right now for the local car dealership that, the booster slides $1 million to give the next 5-star recruit, that is not a legitimate NIL deal in the NCAA's eyes with this new settlement. That is what they're trying to get rid of. But the national deals and the big time brands that Kentucky already has a relationship with, those are going to be universally accepted by the NCAA in this new, kind of free market accountability center, if you will. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but just kind of up to this point, Sean, just
I guess
the branding helps Kentucky in that
it,
regard.
it certainly helps Kentucky, but I think that when you're talking something like this, obviously, intelligent and smart people know how to make money, right? Like those guys that you're talking about that are donors. They didn't become rich, like you said, because they're Kentucky basketball fans. But when you're involved with something like this, it's very important, if you're Mitch Barnhart, you're the University of Kentucky Athletics Department, Jack, that you have very intelligent people around making decisions to help navigate this, right? And what are ways that best generate revenue in this era of collegiate athletics? Like you mentioned, football. Football is always going to generate more revenue than men's basketball and any other sport, just because of the popularity of it. The number of people that go to those games, the ticket, everything that goes into a college football Saturday, it's just massive compared to any other sport. But we also know that in this state and at this university, men's basketball moves the needle more than anything. And us as writers and people in media see those numbers every single week. That's how it goes. But it's going to be interesting to kind of follow what Kentucky does with this. Not just Kentucky, but everyone facing these challenges at the same time. These programs that have been at the top. How do you stay at the top in this era of collegiate athletics? You've got to get creative. You've got to be very intelligent with the decisions that are made, and the balancing this thing out, like you said, to where if one program needs this and this go around, then what are we doing for the next go around? And that's where the communication and the decision makings and having those people involved, Jack, that I think are very good at navigating this is going to be pretty impactful for what Kentucky is moving forward as a university and athletics department. But I would like to think that men's basketball is going to be one of the ones that can benefit most from this across the country, just because the brand is so strong. And if you didn't have the brand, you're having to be even more creative. But Kentucky's got the brand to go with it, that I think that they can be at the forefront of what this thing looks like in this new era.
In the focus will be pushed back toward the marketability and the things that Kentucky is so good at. And yes, it's so great to have the best payroll in college sports. It's a nice little ego boost and something you could pat yourself on the back for. But again, it's not sustainable, and it also takes away, the Jasper Johnsons of the world who create the KY till I die mantra totally naturally, totally organically, where that is a local kid making the most of his true name, image, and likeness, and capitalizing on the Kentucky platform for those two things to go hand in hand and skyrocket in NIL. Jasper Johnson is the perfect example of NIL when it's done properly and how good it can be. And Kentucky being able to dig back into those roots, that they really did a bang up job when NIL first kind of got rolling in 2021. They really kind of set the foundation of, hey, we can develop these relationships with these national brands, and we can help you become the face of college basketball. That's the goal. That's the whole point. And we kind of got away from that these last two cycles because it has just been a true pay for play model. Hey, agent sets the market value at this kid is worth $2 million. Are you taking it or leaving it? It's a little bit too expensive for my liking. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to pass. Yep, we're game. Let's ball. Okay, well, this other school's offering X number of dollars. Can you match? We do like the opportunity at Kentucky and the platform, but the money is the money. All of those conversations kind of go away. Yes, there will continue to be cheaters. There have the cheaters from day one, cheaters during this era right now, and then there will continue to be at this point forward. But also, my understanding is that the punishments that will come from these guidelines. Hey, we're giving you this. We're setting up guardrails that should be accountable for everybody and beneficial for everybody. But if you go against them and you continue to cheat, we're talking postseason bans. We're talking the punishments are so much steeper now than even they were before, with an expedited kind of process where if you're punished for it, it's an immediate type of deal. So there is kind of an accountability in that regard where they you have no choice but to play within the rules. Or else the punishment is going to be steep. And that's something that Kentucky has really kind of found themselves in that window, Sean, where they can really capitalize on this in a massive way, in ways that most other programs can't. So when we talk about the rev share and what percent each sport gets, I don't think that men's basketball is going to get this dramatic raise in cut of the pie that is kind of maybe perceived nationally just because Kentucky basketball is Kentucky basketball. I do think that there is, and I think it's going to be a changing kind of year by year deal, but I do think that nobody is stupid in that building, and they all understand that football is the moneymaker. Football is where you help pay the bills, and right now it's not paying the bills enough, and next year it's certain as heck not going to pay the bills the way it needs to. But football is going to get a fair slice of the pie to remain however competitive that looks like in today's level of the SEC. But I have heard kind of some feedback that there are going to be ADs, and I do think that Mitch Barnhart is included in this, that they'll cut, we only have 100% of the pie to go through. And if you're not living up to your end of the bar, holding up your end of the bargain, we're not going to invest in you because if you're not holding up, baseball needs our attention right now. We're going to push our chips in on baseball right now. And it is going to be kind of a year by year, like, hey, you're going to be paid as, one of the top dogs in college sports, no pun intended. Like, we're going to hold you accountable to that. And now we can kind of have our say so on how much we want to help you in as we distribute these rev share funds and things like that. So I think Kentucky, don't underestimate Mitch Barnhart being in every single commission conversation and being 4 or 5 steps. I mean, that the LLC that he started with this was so forward thinking that other schools that kind of teased Mitch for being like, oh, he's top button Mitch, he's one step behind, always 2 steps behind. They looked at that. I mean, I was at EYBL a couple weeks back talking to other coaches about it, and they were like, that's our model. We are going to be copying what Mitch Barnhart did moving forward, because that is the future. That is what, if we're going to have to find our competitive advantages where we can get them, and that is absolutely one of them. So after my conversations, I am very, very encouraged about the health of the UK athletics department just in general, but specifically as it relates to Kentucky basketball, because this show is a Kentucky basketball show. That, when you have a high dollar kid, how are we going to afford, for example, a Tyron Stokes next 2026 cycle? How can we afford that guy when it now turns into rev share versus just a true pay for play model? Kentucky, it's kind of excited to have those conversations because they can get back to what they were so good at beforehand, before we got to the Wild Wild West, and that is a true traditional brand and marketing value that comes with NIL.
Yeah, and you mentioned a moment ago about forward thinking, about Mitch Barnhart, and this is the time where you have to be very good at thinking in advance for what your next move is, but maybe more so move 3 and move 4 when it comes to this, right? Like, this is something that you have to be kind of receptive of this, and you want to just accept that this is what it's going to be and move forward. This is how you have to navigate college athletics now. And like, a lot of things have changed when you're talking, scholarships, and you're talking number of players on rosters, and the amount of even getting into other sports, baseball scholarships. While it's not as many players on the roster, but obviously the scholarships are no longer the low number that they were, being having to spread out. But so much is changing around college athletics that when you're talking about, men's basketball, football, and then obviously all the other sports that require attention as well. Like, this is going to be a challenging time, not just for Kentucky. It's a challenging time for anyone that's competing in college sports. But I would like to think that Kentucky has the people in place, Jack, and there's been plenty of conversations leading up to this point, that there's been forward thinking to think, okay, this is a new era. This is how we're going to navigate it to continue to be competitive. But you mentioned a moment ago, football, we're not expecting this to be a great year. And that's where, when it comes into play, that's such a giant portion of your revenue that everyone's going to want their football program to be here. But your basketball powers, your Kansas, your Kentuckys, your North Carolinas, those are the ones that they're going to have to find their own way through this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's a chance for agents to actually do their job. Agents at this point just kind of became money bag throwers and handlers. Now they are going to be in charge of working out deals with these national brands and even the local brands. And you use a guy like Trent Noah, for example, where if his pro upside and from a national scale, like, he might not be, at least yet, a Nike or Dick's Sporting Goods or fill in the blank kind of top dollar market in terms of marketability, but he can be a big time local guy, a regional guy, without it just being, hey, I'm going to go shoot a car dealership commercial and make $2 million the way the cheaters have been doing it. Like, there's a way to do this organically at all level based on marketability and no matter the level of talent from, tip top of the marketability, top 5 recruits, all the way down to, the local kids just trying to get by with a couple grand here or there. So, Kentucky's in a very healthy spot. We'll learn in the next, couple of weeks. Mitch Barnhart said that, in the next couple of weeks we'll get some type of announcement to get a, some type of final decision on what the percentages will look like. But yeah, I'm not expecting anything kind of like, above and beyond. I think it's going to be within the normal windows that we're kind of seeing from a national scale, while also acknowledging it's going to be a year by year basis and subject to change depending on how certain programs are doing or what they need at a specific time. So